The Pretendos have been struggling to find a new narrative to attack Nintendo with for the past couple of years. Typically, when Nintendo is doing very, very well financially, like, Pretendos have a very, very hard time finding anything to complain about. So, for example, during the DS and Wii era, they almost exclusively focused on the Wii and its lack of, like, third-party games while completely disregarding its incredible uniqueness and popularity among its target demographic and the success of the DS to focus instead on like how like the PS360 were the real consoles of that generation. Like even though the Wii was better at like the kind of games that those games offered as well. Today, we're seeing something a little bit similar with the Switch. Right now, there are a number of a number of bad actors who are trying to like damage control the situation and try to put like Nintendo in a bad position. Industry people like business insiders, game journalists. Like there are a lot of people who have an invested interest to get rid of Nintendo and try and promote other console brands. It's a big reason why you're seeing all this like contempt for Nintendo, even in this like supposed golden age of like popularity, like the resurgence of all these popular franchises, the decline of PlayStation and Xbox as brands. Like Nintendo's like basically on top of the world, and yet the industry does not want to admit it. Like even today, they don't like to admit that Breath of the Wild is not just one of the best games on the Nintendo Switch. It's one of the best games of the generation and one of the best games ever made. One of the best open world games in particular, completely BTFOing shit like Cyberpunk 2077, Red Dead Redemption 2, and The Witcher 3. Like it just completely demolishes all those games, seemingly with little effort, with like a long history behind it of great stellar software. Like Link's Awakening did really well. Skyward Sword is going to do really well. Breath of the Wild 2 is doing really well. Meanwhile, none of these people can put out even a mediocre sequel to their beloved games that only sold due to like coming out at the right place and the right time. Like there is Nintendo is doing fantastically well right now, but you always have the doomers. Like you always have you always have the no go people. You always have like those people who are for whatever reason have a bone to pick with Nintendo. Like whether it's for views, whether it's like genuine disdain for the company, whether it's due to like some long-standing like hatred and contempt for them, like perpetuated by like Sega commercials from the 90s. There's all sorts of reasons for it, but this time I want to focus on the most recent example I've seen of like the industry trying to like destroy Nintendo for seemingly no reason. And it involves a really interesting individual, like someone that I've been aware of for quite some time, someone who has been desperately trying to promote their own career at the expense of Nintendo's. And that person is, of course, Gilles Goddard, I believe. One of the Argonaut guys behind like Star Fox, like one of those 4 British developers that helped develop the original Star Fox, worked with Miyamoto to like develop this thing, and I believe he worked on Star Fox 2. Worked on like the face model for Super Mario 64. Went on to work on games like 1080, and now is working on his own company, designing VR games for VR headsets. So that is this guy's career path. Went from like working on some of the most influential, popular games of all time to working on like a dead piece of hardware. And how does one promote a dead piece of hardware? How does one build themselves up? How does someone like try to make what they're doing now seem super relevant and exciting? Shit on like what you've done previously. Like that's what it comes down to, I think. Like whenever I hear like Goddard like come out like in an interview or something, and like people want to talk to him about like Super Mario 64, about Star Fox, about Miyamoto, about Nintendo, like he'll answer the questions, but there's this weird sort of like underlying like disdain for the whole thing. Like, oh man, it's weird what people think of like work that it's weird how people like respond to like a mediocre work you did like in your 20s, right? Like in your early 20s when you were just a kid, and how they like don't know about like the really cool stuff you're working on now, like VR headsets, like flying paper airplanes through rings. Isn't that fucking cool? Like, isn't that so much better than Super Mario 64, a title that defined 3D gaming? Isn't that exciting? Isn't that brand new, exciting technology that only I, Goddard, could have possibly come up with? It's bizarre. Like, this isn't the first time I've seen this happen. Like, we've addressed this. I've noticed this, like, this behavior from him since at least 2016, since around the point where maybe not 2016, maybe 2017. I would say like around the point that Star Fox 2 was re-released for the first time. He started like popping up in the news occasionally, like discussing this kind of stuff, and it comes down to this kind of thing. And the reason I'm bringing this up now, the reason I wanted to make a video like talking about this individual in particular, is his recent claim on Reddit. He did an AMA on there, like talking about Nintendo and stuff like that, and he came out with one of the more disgusting things I've seen coming from like a former Nintendo dev in a long, long time. His claim is that Nintendo, like following Iwata's death, Nintendo has been seized by shareholders. They are being completely controlled by the shareholders who want to like shutter the console industry, license out their IPs to Nintendo's IPs to other companies, and go fully in on mobile development. That's kind of his narrative, and that was kind of the angle he was going at. Like that was kind of like his belief that he was pushing on there, like using his experience on Star Fox, on Nintendo series like that in general, on Super Mario 64, to like push this insane conspiracy theory that clearly has no basis in reality. There have been no signs that Nintendo is phasing out of the console industry. There has been no signs that they are like going all in on like the mobile future or whatever nonsense he was saying. There have been no signs that like Furukawa has cucked in that regard. Like Furukawa seems like a great president. Like the more I read about him and see these weird conspiracy theories about him, like, oh, he's a businessman, not a creator. Like, I haven't seen any decline in Nintendo software in general, other than through like Age of Calamity, which I think has more to do with Koei Tecmo in their decline. But that's something completely different. Like Nintendo itself is doing really, really well. Like, I'm really happy with how they're doing. I'm really happy with games like new Pokemon Snap, the way that like the Pokemon remakes are developing. Like, I'm excited for E3. We've gotten lots of great games on Switch already, and we will continue to get them in the future. Like, I've seen no evidence to support these ridiculous claims, and yet here he is on Reddit pushing forward a very particular conspiracy theory in an attempt to sabotage Nintendo. And clearly, I think, the reason he's doing this is to draw attention to himself, his company, and his VR products. That's what he's trying to do, is try to establish himself as being superior to Nintendo. And it's one of the most sad, pathetic things I think I've seen anyone ever do. Like, it is horrible what he's done. Like, what he's been trying to say. Like, promoting his shitty VR headset game. Like... like defiling Nintendo's good name, like their partnership together, like the products the classic products they designed together in an attempt to like make himself more famous. Like, fuck you, Goddard, you piece of shit, and fuck anyone who believes your nonsense. Like, you are a nobody. Like, okay? Like, you will always be known as a guy who worked on Star Fox. That's it. Your career is never going to take off. You're in your 40s now. You have no future. Like, you're never going to work with Nintendo again, like, in any meaningful capacity. Like, you've been replaced by younger, superior developers, and for good reason, because you come off like a complete tool. Like, I don't want you back at Nintendo. Like, I don't want you working on another game for them. Like, I want you to just fuck off and stop making up bullshit for attention. Like, you need to just go away and stop running your mouth. Nintendo is doing great and will continue to do great long after you're dead and retired.